Hi, my name is Vikram Gupta, and welcome to PreSales Collective's Journey to PreSales. We will be listening to fascinating stories of SCs that made their journey into solutions engineering as a career. Our goal is to inspire you, because if they can do it, so can you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of PreSales Journey to PreSales. I am Yvette Edwards. I'm a Senior Director of Solution Engineering at VMware, and today I'm joined by Jeffrey McAndrew from Dell. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hi, Yvette. How are you?
Good. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name's Jeffrey McAndrew. I'm an advisory systems engineer at Dell Technologies. I work in our federal space, so we all know how that goes. I've been with Dell now going on 13 years, so I've been here a long time. Started my journey in a very different place than most people would, at a milk plant in Brooklyn, but that's another long story. But we can talk about that at some point.
Perfect. Well, I would love our audience to get to know you better. So let's go back to 2020. What was something fun that you loved to do that you couldn't do in 2020?
Go to the gym. Literally, I could not go. Was an avid CrossFitter. Couldn't go to the gym. And honestly, my wife got a little mad when a Peloton showed up. I needed something to do, and she's like, "What's that?" I'm like, your new exercise machine, since I can't go to the gym and I'll drive you crazy." And little did I know that both of my daughters I'd have to fight them for time to get on the Peloton.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that the Peloton craze, definitely took off in 2020. I would see the Peloton trucks drive by my window and it was like, "Yeah, you got a Peloton."
I actually bought it before the lockdown. So I bought it in January, and I thought, because it was one of those things like, I'm going to get it. I'm him and Han, and I got it. And I literally got it in January. And the next thing, March shows up and we can't go anywhere. And then I'm fighting everybody for it in the house, and I still do. So we actually have a Peloton calendar now where people can ride. So I start early. My youngest daughter is when she's done with school, and then my eldest one, she is later in the afternoon, and my wife does the yoga on the TV. Or she rides. So we have to keep a calendar to keep it straight.
That's amazing. So, Jeffrey, we would just love to hear your story. So we know that so many people stumble into this career of pre-sales. Can you tell us your story?
So I guess stumbling is probably another good word. Jokingly, right out of college, when I graduated in 1992, didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I was living in New York City at the time, so I applied for jobs with the fire department of New York City. I applied for NYPD. My great aunt was a special agent in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I actually applied for a job there with the Civilian Support Agency, basically the guys that do all the surveillance before the agents actually show up at big events. 92, if anyone remembers, there was a ton of budget cuts right before Clinton became president. So it was not a good time to be job hunting. I ended up getting a desktop support job at a milk plant in Brooklyn, New York. Very, very interesting place, to put it nicely. Doing desktop support, it was fun. It was really easy because literally there was about 100 users there, and I'd go fix their PC. Somebody couldn't log in, change passwords, the very simple stuff. As time grew on, the job kind of got a little boring. So I started moving into more of the production side of the milk plant, and route management, and did a little bit of programming. The crazy part about it, the person who we partnered with to do our route management program sold his entire company to SAP for like $3 billion back in 300 million back in 1992. They wanted that specific route management inventory piece of him. After Sunnydale, I went to a small construction. It was Sunnydale Farms in Brooklyn, by the way. I went to a small construction company based in Manhattan. It was a mom and pop shop. We actually revamped. I was actually part of the team that revamped their entire go-to-market program. They were running on a VAX, and at that point in time, we introduced Windows NT. Now I'm really dating myself. We introduced Windows NT to them. Actually, got them a T1 based network. They could contact their local offices, which was always fun. Once those things got delivered, myself or one of the other guys went out, we installed it, got it up and running, and they had access back to their new construction programs. I think it was called Navision or something like that. And then after that, I went into the financial world, because what does everybody want to do in New York? When you live in New York, you want to work on Wall Street. I worked at Thomson. It was the first company I worked for was called Technometrics, and we were acquired by Thomson at the time before they had the Reuters acquisition in the mid 2000s, down on 75 Wall Street. Thomson was buying companies left and right, kind of like the early EMC model in the 2000s. We ended up buying about 5 or 6 different companies, and we ended up consolidating them all. We happened to consolidate them all to One World Trade at that time. So it was Tower 1 of the World Trade Center, and I happened to be in Tower 1 the day it happened on 9/11. That kind of posed me to want to move out of New York at that point. So, but if we have time another time, I can tell you the story about the whole day. So Thomson actually afforded me the ability to move out of New York. I actually moved down here where I am in Maryland now today. And then after that, I moved into more of a director role running multiple data centers around the world. So I had folks in India, I had folks in the UK, Ireland. We had East Coast, Central, Southern, North Central, so like Wisconsin area. We had South Central, so like Austin, Texas area, and then we had a bunch on the West Coast. And then we had, like I said, folks in India, folks in the UK. So we built a follow the sun model because with the financial world, we needed to follow the sun. That started to get old really quick when calls would start happening at 3 o'clock in the morning because somebody couldn't get email. So a friend of mine, actually, who I worked with at Thomson Reuters, he was our sales rep, said, hey, you'd be really good in a pre-sales role. Would you think about it? Because someone with your experience would probably fit in really well. And I said, what's pre-sales? He goes, the guys that come and talk to you before I come and sign you sign the agreements with me. Oh, I'm like, so the smart guys. and he happened to say
the ones that have value.
Right, yeah, the ones who had value and design everything. So at that point, that was 2008-ish, and I was, I started interviewing at EMC at the time. And was like, okay, this sounds like a fun idea, something different. Get to sleep at night, don't have to be on call 24/7, and not get woken up on weekends when when somebody did something stupid, or to tried to work on one of our smaller data centers in the middle of a windstorm and the generator didn't work, and they lost power. So those were always fun and adventurous things that on the the director side or the data center side happened. So ended up getting a job at EMC. It was actually a lot of fun. Moved into the federal space. So I've been in federal the whole time I've been with EMC. I've covered most of the agencies that have been very popular since 2020. Everything of the HHS Optives. And then around 2012, I actually moved in to cover an agency that affects everybody every day, the United States Postal Service. So I've been on this account now for 9 years. So I expect everybody that sees this to sign up for informed delivery. So go to USPS.gov and sign up for informed delivery. You can actually see when your mail's coming or what mail's coming. And if there's anything you don't want your significant other to see, you can jump to the mailbox first and grab it. So that's always helpful. But yeah, the journey was kind of one that was stumbled into it. Didn't really know what pre-sales was. Found out that it was a fun, and to me, this is one of the better roles because you get to see a little bit of everything, especially now that, when Dell acquired EMC, I got to see a little bit more. But, we've always talked with our friends at HPE and NetApp and all those guys. And a lot of us in the federal space kind of got to work together, and everybody knows everybody since it's a small world. Probably a little bit different in the commercial and enterprise space, but, it's still the same thing. And the customer I cover is more of an enterprise customer than a real federal customer. They're quasi-federal. So yeah, that was kind of my journey on how we got to where I am.
That's a great journey. Thanks so much, Jeffrey. So it sounds like you came from the customer side where you use these products and a pre-sales engineer would come in and you interacted with.
So I will put in a funny plug for VMware real quick. You'll appreciate this. I had, when I was working for Thomson Reuters, we had a data center in Rockville, Maryland, small data center, nothing really big, but they had 211, and don't ask me how they came up with 11, literally desktop computers that were running this one application. And it was actually something that they developed for the SEC, and it would be a bucket, and it would go into another bucket, and each computer was a different, we'll just say, bucket. I wanted to get rid of these things. I'm like, these things are a nightmare. Can we get them out of my data center, please? And the guy looks at me, no, we need them. So I had one of my engineers say, hey, let's go play with this VMware thing, because at that point it was still new to us. Let's go play with this VMware thingy and see what it can do. So we ended up buying a couple of big honking servers, a pair, and we put his entire application on these two servers. And he goes, you can't switch. You can't do it. It can't happen. It can't work. I'm like, you still have 200 some odd servers. It was actually probably more. I think it was ended up being 4 servers. You still have 200 some odd workstations, but they're just consolidated to this small amount. It'll never work. Can't do it. Well, we tested it. It worked. We had a power outage in the data center one day, and like 35 of those things didn't work. We flipped over. We just literally switched the IP addresses, flipped over to the new stuff, and he goes, I can't believe what you guys did. That power outage must have reset everything, and everything's running so much faster. And I'm sitting there laughing. I'm like, really? We just switched everything to 2 boxes, and you didn't notice. So, it is what it is.
So Jeffrey, if I'm a college student and I'm listening to you today and I kind of hear your journey, how do I know pre-sales is the right career for me? What kind of traits do you think are needed?
So you've got to actually be a fairly good storyteller. I think that's one of the biggest things, being able to tell a really good story and be able to back up that story. So if there's a point where you can't back it up and you are not sharp enough technically, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Customers are fairly smart. I mean, yes, the world is very different today than it was in 2008 when I started, and it's very different today than it was 2 years ago. I would even say 25 minutes ago, the way technology changes. But you need to keep yourself, I think the two things is be a very good storyteller, be able to back up your stories. And if you can't, there's nothing wrong with being able to say, hey, I don't know that. Let me get somebody that does. And most of the organizations that are out there, Dell or VMware or our other friends in the ecosystem have, subject matter experts that you can bring in. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I don't know that. I need to get back to you. I think that's one lesson that for some of us is a very hard lesson to learn. But I think once you learn that, you'll be fine, because then you'll start gathering the trust of your customers.
That's such a key point for everyone listening to know is that true collaborative spirit where you do, you don't have to have all the answers, but you just have to know where the answers are. And also that integrity.
Yep. You have friends in low places. That's kind of how I look at it.
So what advice would you give to somebody starting a pre-sales career? What would you tell them is the best thing to do?
Today, again, very different than when I started back in 2008-ish. Probably you're going to, yes, you don't theoretically carry a sales number, but you are a salesperson. You're in a sales type role. You're going to have to learn to sell, and you're also going to have to learn to get along with salespeople, which is a very difficult thing. Salespeople are on a number. They need to sell a widget. You're better off looking at the bigger picture and saying, we could sell a lot of those widgets if we go this way, or we can sell no widgets if we go that way, or, we don't want to sell something point-based anymore. With cloud being part of our world now and virtualization being a huge part of our world, there's a lot of alternatives for other people to go, and it doesn't hurt to keep up on those technologies. I think, so you're kind of like I wouldn't say a referee, where you have to keep your sales brethren happy, you have to keep your customer happy, but you also have to know, I'd say, the technology or all the rules. So that's something that I think is going to be key. The other thing that I think is really going to be key, if you focus on one technology and only one, most customers are going to look at you and say, why? And they'll start asking a lot of questions. So if you're very good at one piece, you need to make sure you have a broad breadth of the entire your company's entire portfolio. Not that you say you have to be a mile deep, maybe a couple feet deep, and that's where you bring in your SMEs. So again, building that trust with the customer that you can find the right people all the time.
Great advice. Definitely having that breadth and having kind of selling a vision. Back to your storytelling. That's really key. Is there anything else you want to tell our audience about why you love pre-sales or why you would recommend it as a career?
I think it's you get to see the technology up front right away. I mean, that's the cool part. I mean, I work for Dell. Freely admit, I've worked for Dell. Dell does some neat things, but I can tell you right now, I'm involved with a lot of stuff with Tanzu. I get to see what Tanzu does. I get to see with Kubernetes. I mean, I could show you a picture. I have my own little Raspberry Pi lab set up here running VMware vSphere ARM with K3s on it, but I can't get Tanzu to run on it just yet, but I'll figure that out. But that's one of the cool things. You get to see the technology right up front, the new stuff that's coming out. You're the tip of the spear. I mean, and you're going to be talking to customers. If you like talking to people and like seeing and solving problems, it's a great place to be. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome, Jeffrey. All right, so just some final questions. What is the technology you think that will transform the future?
Well, I think we're starting to see a lot of it now. You're starting to see cloud. Cloud has been, you go back to 2012 when Joe Tucci started talking about cloud as the next big wave. That's why they called Joe Tucci from EMC the Cloud Father. Way back when. That is, I think, the biggest disruptor in the way business is being done. But I also think that we're going to see more and more stuff done at the edge. So, for example, edge computing, I'll use my customer as a perfect example. What is their edge? Is it us? Is it their letter carriers? Is it their trucks? That's going to be, I think, the next, big hurdle that we see. The other thing that too is I think the amount of data that we're creating, the unstructured data that we see. I think that's going to be big. I mean, how many pictures you have on your iPhone today? Or how many times do how many sensors or cameras are around in pick a city at this point? All that stuff is just streaming in, taking pictures. We're on camera all the time, let's face it. A lot different than when I was growing up, and I'm kind of happy I was growing up before everybody had cameras and the internet thingy. But yeah, I think the edge and the cloud are going to be your two biggest disruptors, and I think at some point in time, we're going to really have to readdress for how we look at business continuity. Is it going to have to be this is good enough? So, for example, company has an outage. Is it good enough for them to be partially running? Is it good for them to be fully running? And then wrapped around that is, how do we keep all this stuff secure? Because I think that is paramount. We see all these, the pipeline one, all this ransomware attacks. I mean, Baltimore County Schools, from what I understand, paid almost $10 million to get back online. I'm like, come on, it's a school district. Why would you be attacking a school district? Literally, let the kids learn. But I think, we're going to have to get very, very better, much better at security than we currently are. I think that's one of our biggest Achilles heels right now is how stuff is secure, and not just in the federal space, but the commercial space. And if somebody does hit you with a ransomware attack, can you recover from it quickly? And then, do I want to do business with that person if they get attacked like that? So security, edge, and cloud, I think, are the three big disruptors we're going to have to deal with over the next 5 to 10 years.
So if you could buy a yacht today, what would you name it?
I just named it after my dog. We'll just call it Minnie.
Awesome, Minnie. And then one final question. What's your favorite Halloween costume?
My favorite Halloween costume. So I actually dressed up as Mr. Incredible this year. So that was fun. So little tidbit. If anybody lives in the Maryland area, my house gets done up for Disney as Christmas. I mean, it's really Disney. I mean, I've been collecting inflatables and Disney decorations for the last 5 or 6 years, or actually more than that, probably about 8 to 10 years now. And it gets a little crazy. So, it gets a little crazy. Let's just put it that way. But,
Awesome. Well, I can relate since I live in Orlando.
There you go. I'll be there. Actually, we'll be there next week.
Thank you, Jeffrey, so much for sharing your story, your journey, and letting us get to know you better.
No problem. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Good to meet you. Bye-bye.